What happens when a simple cartoon becomes too dangerous for the world to handle? Animation has always looked innocent on the surface, yet history reveals a darker truth. Some cartoons were pulled buried or erased because they crossed lines studios wished they had never touched. Racism, political fury, moral panic, wartime propaganda, lost reels, and scandals all shaped these forbidden films. Today, we uncover 15 notorious cartoons the world tried to erase. Let us begin. Number 15. The Simpsons, The City of New York vs. Homer Simpson, 1997. This episode began as a light-hearted comedic adventure and quickly turned into one of the most controversial pieces in modern television animation. When it first aired, it was just another chaotic day in the life of Homer Simpson as he traveled to New York City to retrieve his car from the impound lot. The episode was loud, energetic, and packed with the usual assault of exaggerated jokes that made the series beloved around the world. But everything about its fate changed after the September 11 attacks. Suddenly, a once harmless visual gag in which Bart holds up bus tickets reading 9 and 11 took on a horrifying new meaning. Networks reacted with fear, confusion, and responsibility. Overnight, the episode was pulled from circulation. Stations refused to air it. The idea of showing New York City, gleaming and chaotic, inside a comedy felt too painful for grieving audiences. Behind the scenes, executives debated whether it should ever return. Writers felt conflicted because they had never intended the episode to carry symbolic weight. Animation staff recalled feeling shocked at how a simple joke had transformed into a cultural flashpoint. When the series released its season collections on disc, the studio quietly removed the episode from rotation, creating an unintended aura of mystery around it. Years later, after emotions settled and cultural wounds began to heal, the episode was slowly reintroduced. Today, it stands as a reminder of how drastically world events can reshape art long after its creation. For fans, it became a legendary lost piece of Simpsons history. For media historians, it is proof that even mainstream cartoons can vanish when reality becomes stranger than fiction. Number 14. Tom and Jerry, The Two Musketeers, Censored Versions, 1952. Tom and Jerry were known for slapstick violence, but nothing prepared audiences for the uproar surrounding The Two Musketeers. When it premiered, it was considered one of the funniest and most stylish entries in the entire series, even winning the Academy Award for Best Animated Short. The adventure parody of classic French swashbuckling stories delivered sword fights, oversized feasts, and non-stop physical comedy. Yet under the playful surface, the short carried a darker final image. The episode ends with the defeated Tom facing execution by guillotine. To many audiences, this was another exaggerated bit of cartoon surrealism, but to parents, broadcasters, and censors, the idea of a children's cartoon openly depicting a character about to be decapitated crossed a line they were unwilling to excuse. The controversy grew stronger as international broadcasts responded with shock. Some stations refused to air it entirely. Behind the scenes, animators explained they had followed the style of traditional Mouseketeer melodrama, where death sentences were a common trope. But executives feared backlash from family groups. Censored versions were created for different regions, removing the final sequence or replacing it with abrupt cuts that left viewers confused. Archival reports reveal that the studio received letters both praising and condemning the decision. Some viewers found the censorship excessive, while others claimed it did not go far enough. Over time, the controversy only intensified as critics reevaluated the short through modern lenses. Discussions around cartoon violence resurfaced again in the 1980s and 1990s when edited versions dominated television. As a result, this cartoon became an unlikely symbol of animation censorship. Today, uncut versions exist only in collections intended for adult audiences. Its legacy is a reminder that even comedic series can provoke moral panic when humor and danger collide. Number 13. The Itchy and Scratchy episode, The Deadly Knife Fight, 1995. The Itchy and Scratchy show has always pushed the limits of cartoon violence, yet The Deadly Knife Fight was a step too far for many networks. Designed as a parody of extreme action movies, the episode delivered non-stop chaos as the two characters engaged in a duel that escalated into a whirlwind of stabbings, explosions, and exaggerated gore. Fans adored its unrestrained lunacy, but broadcasters hesitated. Immediately after airing, the public reaction split sharply. Younger fans repeated scenes at school, which alarmed parents and triggered complaints. Some regions banned the episode outright, while others trimmed scenes or replaced entire sequences with still frames. Broadcasters argued that even though Itchy and Scratchy were fictional characters within a fictional universe, the violence felt too specific, too realistic, and too relentless. Behind the scenes, writers defended the episode as a satire of action film absurdity. They pointed out that every injury was exaggerated to impossible levels, making it clear that the cartoon was mocking real-world violence, not encouraging it. However, executives feared political backlash from parent advocacy groups. Production staff later revealed that internal meetings grew tense as the network debated how far animated violence could be pushed in satire. The ban created an unexpected effect. Fans searched for bootleg recordings, which circulated quietly among collectors. The episode gained a forbidden aura, making it even more popular than before. Eventually, edited versions were broadcast during late-night programming blocks, but the original version remained restricted. Today, The Deadly Knife Fight is remembered as one of the most notorious banned segments in comedic animation. It represents how satire can become controversy when extreme humor challenges cultural boundaries. Number 12. Fritz the Cat, 1972. Fritz the Cat stormed into theaters with a reputation that no animated film had ever carried before. Based on the underground comic series, it promised chaos, rebellion, counterculture, philosophy, and a level of adult content unheard of in mainstream animation. Upon release, audiences were stunned. Some praised its honesty, while others condemned its raw depiction of social tension. The film became the first animated feature to receive an X rating in the United States. That alone sparked outrage. In many countries, theaters refused to play it. Conservative regions banned it outright. All of this made the film even more notorious. College students lined up to see what the fuss was about. Critics debated whether it was brilliant or irresponsible. Behind the scenes, the production faced chaos. Director Ralph Bakshi clashed with studio figures who feared lawsuits and protests. Funding was shaky and animators worked under pressure as rumors swirled that the film would never be allowed to reach theaters. Despite these challenges, the team pushed forward, determined to create something new and confrontational. Internationally, some governments labeled the film morally corrupt. Others accused it of political provocation. In certain regions, customs officials seized reels at ports, preventing screenings entirely. These events only added to Fritz the Cat's legend. Over time, scholars reevaluated the film, not as a scandal, but as a turning point in animation history. It forced the industry to admit that cartoons could be art for adults, not just children. It proved animation could bite, protest, shout, and disrupt. Despite the bans, it remains a landmark in animated cinema history. Number 11. Momotaro's Sea Eagles, 1943. During World War II, nations used animation as a tool for propaganda, and Japan was no exception. Momotaro's Sea Eagles stands as one of the most infamous examples. Released during the height of war tensions, it depicted heroic Japanese pilots launching a stylized attack on an enemy naval base inspired by the Pearl Harbor assault. Audiences at the time saw it as nationalistic entertainment, but post-war critics recognized its deeper political function. After Japan's surrender, Allied occupation forces banned the film immediately. Authorities ordered prints destroyed or confiscated, fearing that the cartoon could inspire nationalistic sentiment during a fragile transition period. As a result, the film became an underground legend. Film historians scrambled to locate surviving copies. For decades, the short remained almost impossible to view legally. Production notes reveal that animators worked in challenging conditions with limited supplies and tight deadlines. Yet they poured meticulous detail into scenes of military formations and aerial maneuvers. The goal was to boost morale and present a stylized heroic myth of Japan's wartime power. Although intended as uplifting propaganda, it became deeply controversial once the war ended. For years, the cartoon existed only in myth until partial reels resurfaced in archives. Restoration teams eventually rebuilt lost sequences, allowing scholars to study the film's influence on early Japanese animation techniques. Even though it remains controversial, its importance in the history of anime cannot be ignored. It is a reminder that animation can become a political weapon, shaping narratives far beyond the screen. Number 10. The Censored 11, 1931 to 1944. Among all the lost pieces of American animation, none are as infamous as the Censored 11. This group of 11 Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies shorts was officially pulled from circulation by Warner Bros. Because of racially offensive imagery. While many old cartoons contained insensitive portrayals, the 11 crossed a threshold that modern audiences and broadcasters could not accept. For decades, these films were locked away, making them almost mythical within animation history. When these cartoons originally aired, their creators saw them as parodies of popular culture music and film stereotypes of the era. Audiences of the time laughed without questioning their implications. But as decades passed and racial awareness evolved, the starkness of their portrayals became impossible to overlook. By the 1960s, the studio took action and banned the 11 entirely. No official VHS or television releases were allowed. Reels were stored away with strict restrictions. Behind the scenes, historians discovered heavily damaged prints, abandoned film reels, and incomplete archives. Some staff members from that era later admitted that these shorts haunted the company. Warner executives debated whether they should restore them as historical documents or erase them completely. Restoration experts eventually stepped in to preserve what existed, not for entertainment, but for academic study. Today, the Censored 11 represents a complex legacy. Scholars use them to examine racial portrayals in early American media. Animation fans discuss them as examples of both artistic brilliance and cultural harm. They remain banned from mainstream release, but now exist in controlled environments for historical understanding. Their controversial survival proves how art can reflect the darkest biases of its era, and why some creations become too dangerous to return to the public. Number 9. Scrub Me Mama with a Boogie Beat, 1941. Scrub Me Mama with a Boogie Beat occupies one of the strangest places in American animation history. Released by Universal, this cartoon was originally intended as a lighthearted musical short filled with rhythmic energy and exaggerated comedic motion. But beneath the jaunty soundtrack and bright animation lay imagery that would one day spark intense debate. The cartoon depicts a riverfront community where characters move lazily until a glamorous singer arrives, bringing boogie rhythm that transforms the entire town. Audiences at the time reacted with cheerful enthusiasm, but modern viewers instantly recognized troubling portrayals. By the 1960s, the cartoon faced mounting backlash from civil rights groups who argued that the film relied on demeaning stereotypes. Television stations quickly pulled it from syndication. Archivists placed it in restricted collections, and it became one of the most notorious banned cartoons hidden from the general public. Behind the scenes, animators long believed they were crafting a musical celebration. Interviews with production staff decades later revealed that many had no awareness of how harmful the imagery would appear to later generations. The gap between artistic intent and cultural impact grew bigger each year. The ban created enormous curiosity. Bootleg copies circulated among collectors and historians. Eventually, restoration experts revived an original print for controlled academic viewings. Scholars now use it as a cautionary artifact, illustrating how normalized biases once shaped mainstream entertainment. Scrub Me Mama with a Boogie Beat survives today only in limited releases online, mainly through historical archives and public domain transfers. It remains one of the most accessible banned cartoons for researchers and is often studied as an early example of animation crossing lines that future generations refused to overlook. Number 8. Ren and Stimpy Man's Best Friend, 1992. Ren and Stimpy was always a lightning rod for controversy, but nothing prepared Nickelodeon for the internal storm caused by man's best friend. The episode featured hyper-exaggerated violence, surreal imagery, and emotional cruelty, presented with a chaotic comedic pace. Even fans of the series found themselves stunned by its intensity, but executives were horrified. The short included an infamous scene where Ren savagely attacks a character in a parody of cartoon slapstick. Instead of soft impact gags, the animators pushed into disturbing exaggeration. Nickelodeon executives reportedly froze after seeing the completed cut. They feared parental backlash and advertiser panic. As a result, they banned the episode before it ever aired on television. Behind the scenes, tensions rose sharply. Creator John Kricfalusi defended the episode as a satire of classic cartoon brutality, claiming that old cartoons were far rougher than modern audiences remembered. The network disagreed, and the dispute contributed to his eventual removal from the show. Production staff later described that period as chaotic, with artists caught between creative ambition and corporate restraint. When the episode later surfaced in a syndicated release for adult audiences, it instantly became infamous. Fans discussed it as a lost chapter that symbolized the clash between artistic freedom and broadcast standards. The ban also strengthened the cult aura surrounding Ren and Stimpy, showing how daring animation can exist only when networks are willing to take risks. Man's Best Friend remains a milestone in the history of censored Western animation. Number 7. Mighty Mouse, The Powdered Donut Incident, 1987. Mighty Mouse had always been a heroic symbol for children, so no one expected him to be at the center of a national moral panic. In this particular episode, Mighty Mouse crushes a powdered donut and inhales the crumbs with exaggerated enthusiasm. To the creators, it was a simple visual gag. To a vocal group of critics, it was something far darker. They believed it resembled drug use, and they reacted fiercely. Almost overnight, complaints flooded networks. Parent groups launched public campaigns claiming the cartoon promoted harmful behavior. Even though the creators insisted it was innocent, the pressure mounted. CBS investigated the scene and considered removing the entire episode from circulation. Creators stood by the harmless intent, but eventually agreed to cut the scene for future airings to avoid further uproar. Behind the scenes, staff members recalled how shocked they were that a show as wholesome as Mighty Mouse could be interpreted in such an extreme way. The debate spread so quickly that even newspapers and talk shows weighed in. Some defended the cartoon as harmless, while others insisted that even unintentional imagery could influence children. After the edits, the episode returned to broadcast, but its reputation was sealed. Fans searched for uncut versions which circulated privately among collectors. The controversy transformed a single 3-second gag into one of the most widely misunderstood moments in animated television. Today, the powdered donut incident stands as a reminder that controversy does not always come from deliberate intent. Sometimes public perception creates the scandal, leaving creators stunned by how their work is reinterpreted. The episode remains an iconic example of moral panic shaping the fate of animation. Number 6. Bugs Bunny, Nips the Nips, 1944. Created during World War II, Bugs Bunny Nips the Nips was a product of wartime patriotism, yet it quickly became one of the most banned cartoons ever produced. At the time, audiences saw it as a humorous rallying piece portraying Bugs battling Japanese soldiers in an exaggerated slapstick style. But post-war viewers saw something far different and far more troubling. The cartoon relied heavily on caricatures that were typical of wartime propaganda. Exaggerated features, cultural stereotypes, and hostile humor filled every scene. As global awareness grew regarding racial portrayal and media responsibility, this cartoon became impossible to defend. By the 1960s, most broadcasters banned it entirely. Warner Bros. Removed it from circulation, and it never returned to mainstream television. Behind the scenes, the creation process reflected the intensity of wartime propaganda. Artists worked without considering future generations. For them, the goal was to support morale by mocking the enemy through exaggerated comedic tropes. But as decades passed, animators expressed discomfort with the imagery. Some even wished the cartoon had never been made. Despite the ban, historians now study the cartoon as a window into wartime media psychology. It reveals how humor was used to dehumanize opponents and how art can unintentionally preserve messages that age poorly. Bugs Bunny Nips. The Nips remains locked away from public distribution, yet its legacy endures as a cautionary tale about the power of animation to shape cultural attitudes. Number 5. Clean Pastures. 1937. Clean Pastures began as a parody of the popular film The Green Pastures and was intended as a humorous fantasy set in a heavenly version of Harlem. Warner Bros. Believed they were crafting a playful musical short filled with jazz-inspired movement and surreal storytelling. But when it reached theaters, reactions were sharply divided. Some audiences laughed at its energetic style, while others were struck by the uncomfortable caricatures of black cultural life. Within a decade, radio groups, newspapers, and advocacy organizations targeted the cartoon for perpetuating harmful portrayals. Broadcasters responded by pulling it from rotation. Clean Pastures became one of the earliest Warner Bros. Works to be deliberately suppressed. By the mid-20th century, it disappeared from television entirely. Behind the scenes, the production process was complex. Animators experimented with jazz-timing unconventional character movements and bold scene transitions. Yet, despite this technical innovation, the visual representation overshadowed every artistic achievement. Former staff later acknowledged that the short reflected widespread misunderstandings of African American culture common among studios at the time. Collectors spent decades searching for original prints. Many assumed it was lost until archivists unearthed surviving reels in studio vaults. Only then did scholars fully analyze its style and context. Today, Clean Pastures is accessible through public domain channels, but only as an educational artifact. The cartoon remains a vivid example of how animation can reveal the cultural blind spots of its era. Its ban reflects shifting awareness and responsibility, and it continues to challenge modern viewers to examine the intent and impact of early Hollywood storytelling. Number 4. Angel Puss. 1944. Angel Puss stands as one of the most controversial Looney Tunes shorts ever produced. It was pulled from circulation so completely that even seasoned animation fans were unaware of its existence for decades. The short tells the story of a young boy tasked with drowning a talking cat who repeatedly pretends to haunt him in a series of surreal gags. While the comedic structure might sound typical of the era, its portrayal of characters triggered its permanent removal. From the moment advocacy groups examined Angel Puss, they condemned its heavy reliance on caricatures. Warner Bros. Reacted by placing the cartoon under strict suppression. It would never appear on television again and was later classified alongside the most restricted works in the company archives. Behind the scenes, the production team worked under tight schedules and had little understanding of the cultural implications embedded in their designs. Some animators decades later expressed regret that they had contributed to a film that would be remembered more for harm than humor. Bootleg prints emerged in private collections and eventually surfaced in public domain circulation. Today, Angel Puss is studied in film schools to show how even seemingly simple comedy can reinforce damaging imagery. Its legacy is complex but important because it highlights how animation can reveal the unconscious biases of its era. Number 3. All This and Rabbit Stew. 1941. All This and Rabbit Stew stars Bugs Bunny in a hunting parody that was once embraced as harmless slapstick. But as decades passed, it became one of the most heavily condemned cartoons ever created. The plot follows Bugs outwitting a hunter, but instead of the familiar Elmer Fudd archetype, this version portrayed a stereotype that modern audiences immediately recognize as offensive. By the 1960s, television stations began removing the cartoon from rotation. When Warner Bros. Officially banned the censored 11, All This and Rabbit Stew became one of the central titles targeted. Unlike other Bugs Bunny shorts, it virtually vanished from mainstream viewing. Behind the scenes, animators recalled that they were following comedic formulas popular at the time without understanding the cultural impact. The humor relied not only on Bugs' antics, but on portraying the hunter in ways modern audiences reject entirely. Years later, film historians analyzed it as an example of how beloved characters can be placed in narratives that age poorly. Today, All This and Rabbit Stew exists mostly in digital archives and public domain transfers. It is frequently cited in academic discussions about representation in early American media. Although banned, it remains vital for understanding how iconic characters like Bugs Bunny were shaped by the social attitudes of their time. Number 2. Jungle Jitters, 1938. Jungle Jitters is one of the most widely banned cartoons in American animation history. Released by Warner Bros., it follows a wandering salesman who enters a jungle village and encounters a series of exaggerated comedic situations. Modern audiences quickly understand why the cartoon vanished from circulation. The portrayals and gags were based on stereotypes that later generations found deeply unacceptable. Television networks removed Jungle Jitters from broadcast as early as the 1950s. When Warner Bros. Took decisive action decades later, this cartoon became part of the heavily restricted archive. Scholars who gained access noted that even by the standards of its time, the short stood out for its extreme caricatures. Behind the scenes, animators were focused on creating energetic slapstick. They built fast-paced sequences and rhythmic musical cues. Production records suggest that the team never predicted the long-term consequences of the imagery they used. Despite being banned, Jungle Jitters remains one of the most widely available restricted cartoons because it entered public domain collections. As a result, it can be found more easily than many other suppressed works, allowing researchers and editors to study it openly. Its legacy remains complicated, powerful, and essential to understanding the evolution of media awareness. Number 1. Japoteurs, 1942. Japoteurs is one of the most controversial Superman cartoons ever produced. Created during World War II, it follows Superman as he confronts saboteurs attempting to steal a giant aircraft. The short was designed as patriotic wartime support, but its depiction of Japanese characters led to its long-term suppression. After the war, many broadcasters refused to air it. By the 1970s, Japoteurs had become infamous among animation collectors because it was nearly impossible to find in official circulation. The cartoon resurfaced only when restoration teams released wartime Superman collections for historical study. Behind the scenes, the production was fast-paced and driven by wartime enthusiasm. Animators crafted dramatic flying sequences, detailed machinery, and tense action scenes. But these artistic achievements were overshadowed by its racially charged portrayal of villains. Today, Japoteurs is studied as both a technical achievement and a reminder of how propaganda shaped popular culture. It is widely accessible because the Superman shorts have entered the public domain, making it easy for researchers, editors, and historians to find footage. Although banned in many regions, it stands as one of the most significant wartime cartoons preserved for academic review.